to Sandy and Nora's podcast.
Hey, Nora.
Hey, Sandy. Oh my God. Hi.
Yo, hi.
Yes.
Oh
We're
my
back.
God. And we are back. How are you? It has been too long.
Mm-hmm.
Miss your voice.
I miss your voice.
Well, here we are back again. How was your little break? How's that?
It was amazing. I had the opportunity to go a lot of different places and see a lot of different things, and shout out to everyone I met in Halifax and Dartmouth. That was such an amazing trip, and I had a lot of fun and did some funny things. And so I mean, it was just awesome. Like, you know, of course, people get the right to vacation, right? But I do want to say thank you so much to fans for making that even possible. Like, you fund us, and it gives us enough money to be able to take some time off, and we really need it. And I needed it, and it was awesome. And how was your break?
My break was full of work. I mean, some folks responded to me on social media, which, you know, if you've been following me on social media, you know that I don't really post. And you may have seen a flurry of content on my Instagram recently, because they do these things called collaborator posts now. So it's actually not me posting. It's like one of the people that I'm working with on a project who's posting, but it makes it my post also. But anyway, I'm just like, oh, I'm getting notifications because I've turned off all notifications on my phone too. So I'm just like, I go in and I'm like, there's lots of things happening here. And some Sandy and Nora listeners have seen that I have been working on a film that will be premiering at TIFF, a short film, and a television show documentary, which will also be premiering at TIFF, and been like, oh, is this what you've been hinting at on Sandy and Nora? Yes.
Yes.
Yes, that is what I've been hinting at. One of the projects that I've been hinting at. So it turns out there's a lot of prep that you have to do before a film festival. So I've been working my butt off on that. And then also, as some folks may also know, you know, I've been writing a book about policing and made some really good headway during the time that you were gone, and I was missing your voice. And yeah, I'm feeling good about all of the things that I've been working on.
Now, we are recording this on a Tuesday, and by the time you are listening, it will be a week has passed, and Sandy has already done the red carpet thing twice. But I am so excited for you. I guess I should work in the past tense here. You had such an amazing week. So congratulations.
I mean, I hope so. But if you're listening to this on Tuesday morning when it comes out, there will still be an opportunity to see Black Life, the premiere of Black Life, which is the documentary, because it premieres that day. And Black Life also will be showing later on in the week on September 15th. And the short film that I made called Aftercare with fellow producers Rodney DeVerlis and Anuba Momin will premiere, will have already premiered by the time you're listening to this, but will also be available to watch on the Wednesday. So tomorrow, if you listen to Sandy and Nora when it first comes out.
Wow. And do you think that it's ever going to be put onto like flights, on Air Canada flights? Because that's where I see most of my Canadian short films.
Listen, that's my dream. Okay?
No kidding.
I'm just like, please, somebody put this on a flight. This will be great. No, but honestly, the support has been really cool. There's been a lot of folks who are really interested in what we're working on. And so, you know, we've got more projects in the pipeline. So I hope that we're able to make more stuff that, you know, will be the type of thing that Sandy and Nora audiences will want to see.
I love it. I love it. That's so awesome.
Thanks, man.
We have some announcements to make, and we have a lot of people to thank. So let's do the announcements because they're the most exciting. Sandy, we're coming to Toronto for a live show.
We're coming to Toronto. So, you know, I'm going to go to Toronto for TIFF, and then I'm going to leave Toronto, and then I'm going to come back in the second weekend of October and, you know, come spend some time with us.
Yes. Okay, so we are going to be opening tickets You know what? You're listening. I'll let folks know in the Daily News today, you can get your tickets today. We will link to the link to get your tickets. I'm saying this because I still have to set it up and I don't know if it's going to be Eventbrite or another platform, but tickets will be on already on sale after this episode drops. And it's October 14th. So save the date, the Review Cinema in Toronto. And we have a super special musical guest, which we will reveal next week. Bum, bum, bum.
Yay. Very exciting.
Yes. Now, we are also very, very close to confirming another live show in Winnipeg. So, Winnipeg folks, keep your ears tuned to these episodes, and we will tell you more when we have a confirmation. But it will be probably closer to the end of November.
It's been a while since I've been to Winnipeg. I'm looking forward to that one.
I know, me too. It was like the 100th anniversary of the general strike got me there a lot. And then, COVID happened.
Oh, right. Remember that.
Yeah. So all of that is to say, things are happening. It's fall. It feels great. School is in the air. And we got some people to thank.
School is in the air. Oh, man. I mean, there's a lot happening with school, which I think is going to be the theme. But before we get there, tell us about these people we have to thank.
Yes. So we've been off for a while. So here's all of the people. Thank you so much for continuing to sustain us, especially when we're off and you're paying money and we're not doing episodes. That's kind of really important to let us take some time off. So special thanks especially to Melissa, Jeanette, Rowan, Andrew, JBH, Nick, Veltwalker, Taryn, and John. Thank you all so much. And to everybody that supports the podcast in material and immaterial ways.
Yes, we could not thank you all enough. So here we are. We're back. It's September. School is, as Nora put it, in the air, I guess. And gosh, it feels like we can't escape the news about like certain things going on at school. And it's bizarre. It's weird because none of it feels real. The two major stories I'm talking about are, one, the story around parental rights, which is raging in some provinces more than others, but has become a national discussion. And of course, Pierre Poilievre really wanting that to be a national discussion going into the next election. And number two, the housing crisis and how, like the very amazing spin on the typical xenophobic discussions of like how the economy is always the fault of people from outside. Mm-hmm. In particular, folks are really focused on international students this time. And so we thought perhaps now is a time to discuss some school issues.
Yeah. So the summer was really marked with a lot of these kinds of school issues. So I'm going to start, I'm going to focus on higher education, and then we can talk about that, and then maybe go to the lower education of primary and secondary schools and this parental rights bullshit. I don't know if you've seen all of the stories related to universities and colleges doing fuckery related to international students, but Northern College has just had a whole bunch of students left high and dry by them attracting them to Canada, encouraging them, international students, to come to Canada, and then not being able to deliver on programs that they had subcontracted to a private company, and it's operating in Toronto, which is like kind of far from Northern Ontario, where Northern College is based. So that's one thing that's been going on. Toronto Metropolitan University, my former school.
Wait. Sorry. This is going too fast.
There's so many, though. This episode can't be 2 hours long, but please, yes.
Sorry. Northern College is subcontracting education work to a private college?
Yeah, I mean, it's a completely bonkers story. So about 500 students were accepted by Northern College to study at something called Purist College of Technology, which the way CBC describes it is an affiliate. And the students were all accepted to study there in Scarborough. And then Northern College rescinded their study visas. So Now these students are left high and dry. Centennial College has stepped in and said that they'll take them on. The federal government was frustrated because they're like, hey, Northern College, you could have just given this many visas to these students. That's not your job, which is true. It's not. And students are now having to deal with being refunded or transferred or, some are already in Canada. Some haven't come to Canada yet. And so that's obviously going to throw their plans into complete disarray.
Okay. Yep.
Yeah. Yeah. And this is not the first time either that this has happened. CBC reporting as well that this happened in May, where hundreds of students who were accepted by St. Lawrence College, another small-ish college in Ontario, they had also a partnership with something called the Alpha College of Business and Technology, another private college operator. So for folks that don't understand, Ontario's public colleges, they are all approved by a single piece of legislation, one piece of enabling legislation that lets the colleges all operate. And it's because it's one piece of legislation, the colleges all look very similar. They offer similar programs. They offer the same kinds of degrees. They have the same kinds of learning standards. And so this proliferation of private colleges that are being given, I guess, the ability to grant certificates and diplomas by their partnership with these public colleges, I mean, this is a freaking crisis. This is a nightmare. This is something that, like, we'd be talking about, what do we have to smash when you and I were back in the student movement?
100%. And I just again, don't understand how this is allowed under a system of public education, that you would be able to give as much money as I'm assuming they have to give to get a partnership like this going to a private institution, and then have a fuck up so bad that students are just left shit out of luck. That doesn't seem... I mean, gosh, there's been so much failure in the post-secondary education system, which we'll get to, but wow. Okay, what's the next story?
Yeah. Well, then you have my former university, Toronto Metropolitan University, that was opening a campus in, let's see. It's a downtown Toronto school. Where would be the most obvious place, Sandy, to open a new little campus?
Dubai. No, I'm kidding.
Yeah, so you're not far. They chose Cairo.
So
Cairo
what?
In Egypt.
What?
The Toronto Metropolitan University at Cairo. Yeah. Which was a disaster. So it opened last year. It had all these students accepted, and it couldn't get off the ground. And now, again, students are stranded. And the university is saying, you know what? Come to Canada. We'll just admit you to our university. So that also is news that broke in the middle of August. And again, I look at this and say, why in the hell is Toronto Metropolitan University operating in Cairo, in Egypt? I mean, in not Canada, in not Ontario, in not Toronto. It doesn't make any sense.
Toronto's Cairo campus. I mean, unless the purpose is just to make a bunch of money, and in which case, sure, it makes sense.
Ding, ding, ding. Ding, ding, ding. And then, of course, the thread that runs through all of this are international students, and this whole narrative now that they are driving the housing crisis.
This is just so... I mean, you have to skip a few steps to decide that it's international students that are the link for why the housing crisis is the way it is. Because, of course, international students, they don't have any power to decide how housing is going to run when they get to this. They're just trying to figure out where it is that they can live. And you know what would be the best place for them to live, Nora?
On campus, maybe?
Yeah, probably on campus. It's almost as though, if they're going to be accepted as resident students, that the institution that accepts them should probably be responsible for where they live and making sure that they have enough enough subsistence, which many schools all over the world do. But for some reason in Canada, we do not see that any longer as a responsibility of the institution. We see that as a responsibility of the student themselves. And so institutions have not been making sure that there is housing for international students, which leaves this quite vulnerable population really open to exploitation. So then to look at them and be like, that's the problem, like is really bizarre, because international students are being exploited, certainly by the housing market, like everyone else is, as much as they're being exploited by the education system and by governments who want to fund education through international students rather than funding it through making the investments into post-secondary education that they should.
Yeah, like imagine every single time that you've heard in the last 3 or 4 weeks that the housing crisis is driven by international students, that we instead heard that the housing crisis is driven by money laundering, speculation, inappropriate expectations on returns of investment, corporate landlords, the things that are literally actually causing the housing crisis, and not, 400 students who had their visas accepted and then canceled and then put into total limbo and were left hung out to dry by these frankly horrifying institutions. Like, I've never liked college administrators. They're like on my list of very high up of people who are always trash. But they just keep getting more and more trash, it seems.
Yeah, gosh. I mean, I continue to not understand why there are so many of them.
Now, there is one other issue that I wanted to just highlight that is not new, but that isn't getting much coverage in English Canada, which is that in Quebec, colleges here have been applying for visas from the federal government. And somewhere between 80 and 90% of the visas they apply for students coming from Africa are being denied. So by the federal government, they're not applying to Quebec. And so there's also this very interesting racist, anti-Black racism that's embedded within the federal government that is also not at all being talked about. And then all of a sudden, you've got Minister Sean Fraser and now Immigration Minister Mark Miller saying, oh, well, actually what we need is a cap actually on international students.
Oh my God. I mean, perhaps our next episode, we should talk about immigration, because that is happening in other ways elsewhere. But I think you discussed that yesterday on the Daily News show. Did you?
Well, I mean, yesterday was like a week ago, so I don't remember. But yeah, of course. Now, I think that the big issue for me in all of this is that this is all happening because college operators are scrupulous, unscrupulous, whatever, terrible people, government, they're all terrible people. But Sandy, where's the student movement in all of this?
Listen, it is so distressing to me. It's so distressing to me. I haven't been reading much from the student movement, and I'm not sure. Perhaps some of our listeners can tell us, because it just seems like this is the kind of thing that I would love to see students interjecting on and interrupting the narrative on, because the fact that this absurd argument has been able to proliferate so many different news sources, like there should be someone there saying like, this is absurd, and pointing us back in the right direction. International students are vulnerable and are being exploited, and are also, our economy relies on international students, and we need people who are the experts to tell us that, and those experts should be in the student movement. So, I'm not sure. It's really quite distressing. At the same time, we're seeing a robust student movement in the United States that is really continuing to push for the elimination of student debt. And, I was, hoping to see some of that energy on this side of the border, but that hasn't really been translating either. I mean, I suppose there's some new news about the permanence of eliminating interest on federal student loans, but it's like, oh my gosh, if there's already interest in doing that, there should be a really strong student movement pushing it farther, trying to go all the way for free education. And I don't see it right now. And it's really sad.
Yeah, well, I think that there's a real loss of understanding for what the necessity is for having autonomous student organizing. And autonomous student organizing is something that universities and colleges have always tried to destroy. Political parties have also tried to destroy it. And that is organizing that is paid for by student fees and run solely by students for themselves. And in a lot of cases, like in the Ontario college system, that autonomous student organizing has been crushed, destroyed, and killed as far back as the mid-1990s. In the university system in Ontario, it's different. In colleges in other parts of Canada, it's different. Certainly it's different in Quebec. But this loss of understanding for what the need of autonomous student organizing is, I think part of this, it's like students have to be independent. Students have to be independent from the thumb of their administrators so that they can fight against these administrations. And I don't have a doubt in my mind that had I, been on campus back in the days when I was a student activist at Ryerson, we would have been fighting against the administration opening a campus in Egypt. I mean, that's completely ridiculous. Just as I remember the struggles that students waged at the College of the North Atlantic when they opened a campus in Qatar, 15 years ago or so. So there's always a need for that autonomous student pressure to be fighting against these terrible policies. But I know that the pandemic especially, and high tuition fees and attacks on student funding, like the Student Choice Initiative that the Ontario Conservatives tried to put forward, like these things have been poison to student movements. And it has been very, very difficult to try and reconstitute them. I mean, I talk to students everywhere I go who are like, so depressed about the state of student organizing on campus, and they don't know what to do or where to even start sometimes.
So are you going to enroll somewhere? Should we make a comeback?
Oh my God.
I go to school every 2 years or so after I graduate. So
that's right. I mean, you're missing an engineering degree. So which school is that one going to be?
Might as well. I was thinking of, maybe being a doctor. I'm not sure.
Oh, interesting. Well, then you have to go probably all the way back, right?
No, I'm obviously never going back to school. But I mean, gosh, now that I've said that. But no, I do, there is something here, where I feel, I don't know, like if there's anyone who's struggling to try to figure it out, what to do in this, with this state of things at post-secondary education, and has some ideas, but just doesn't know how to execute them. Like, if there's a thing that I'm an expert in, it's this. and Nora and I we want to be able to support this because student organizing is a conduit to so much other organizing in Canada, and if it has played that role. Its history in Canada is to feed other organizing. And so when the student movement is really weak, it has ripple effects across what we're able to do in Canada. And so if that is you, it sounds like you, and you're like just trying to figure it out, you need some help, some support, we will try to help and support in the ways that we're able to.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And in all of this, I did see one organized student group leading the charge against our second topic, and that was UR Pride, the student pride organization at the University of Regina. They have declared that they are going to take on the Mo government for their completely ridiculous, hateful pivot towards using transphobia, bigotry, homophobia to get some cheap points in that province. And so maybe that's the point to talk about now, the point of departure from higher education to lower education, and this move to try and make an issue out of students changing their pronouns or their names in school where there isn't actually really an issue.
I mean, every time like a law like this passes, like I want people to be savvy enough to see that it's total bullshit, and it's obviously serving some other purpose. I mean, the first question to ask would be like, how would a law like this even work? It's impossible to make a law like this work. So it's obvious that it's not actually intended to work. It's intended to get an emotional rise out of particular people, and on the backs of some of the most vulnerable people, because for the people for whom this matters the most are students who do not have the type of support or a home life where something like this could mean the difference between having somewhere to sleep and not having a home at all. And it's just absurd that this could possibly be the number one topic that these politicians are wanting to focus on in terms of education, because there is a lot wrong with our education systems and the way that students are expressing themselves, the ways that students can feel a certain freedom to express themselves at school that they may not have at home, are not the problem with the education system. And to invoke the idea of like parental rights instead of just talking about what it is that you're actually wanting to do, which is to monitor, to run surveillance on students who are trans, and to restrict trans students from their gender expression, calling that parental rights, like what an ugly, ugly thing. Like, do we have parental, are there, Nora, you're a parent, are there parental rights to stop your kid from doing algebra because you just don't believe in it? Like what the fuck, like that, it's just absurd to think like all of a sudden, oh my God, parental rights. No, like fuck, what about the rights of the kids who are in the classroom, those students? They also have rights. And sorry, those rights are enshrined and are, they take precedent over parents being like, I want to know, what my kid's being called at school. I don't know if my parents knew what my nicknames were at school. Like, it's completely absurd.
I know. Like, I don't know if my parents knew that, there's a whole group of people that just yelled Loretto at me every time they saw me. Like, whatever, right?
I mean, my nickname was and continues to be Sandala. I don't know if anybody knows that. Well, maybe all of Twitter, but besides that,
I was going to say, that's not very secret.
I don't think my parents knew, though.
Yeah, this is an issue that is just so infuriating because it's not being honest. The people having this conversation are not being honest about what we're actually talking about here. And so one of the things that led kind of the flurry of conversation after New Brunswick made the change and while Saskatchewan was talking about making this change, and when I say the change, I mean, I don't actually think policies themselves I shouldn't say this. Months after New Brunswick had this big debate, and then while Saskatchewan was having this big debate, Sandy, did you see this survey from Angus Reid about whether or not Canadians are united or divided on this issue?
Oh my God. I'm already upset about it, but no, I haven't seen it.
Okay, so this was what gave journalists the excuse to have this discussion again and again and again. And, the way that polling works is so Angus Reid's a private company. They get money from other companies to run polling. And one of the ways that they stay relevant is by driving public opinion on certain issues by asking questions. They are, a lot of people say they're like a conservative polling firm. At the end of the day, they are a polling firm and they make money as they run polls. And so Angus Reid runs a poll. And I'm going to tell you first the way that journalists reported the poll before I actually tell you what the poll said. Okay. So this is an article from Global News from August 28th. It is very similar to all of the other stories that I saw in all of the other news organizations that I saw. Okay. So the headline here is Canadians divided on parental consent on pronoun changes, poll finds. And the lead, an Angus Reid poll delved into the highly debated topic of whether a parent should be informed if a child wants to change their name or pronouns. Okay. Now, right off the bat, it is framing this whole thing as highly charged, difficult debate, blah, 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 right? Now, if you actually go to the poll, and of course, like when they say that it's divided, actually it was like something 70, some high number of 70% of parents thought that they should be, people thought that parents should be informed. And so this became, oh my God, look at the homophobia. Oh my God, look at the transphobia. This is so divisive. This is what governments are doing is against what parents and what citizens and voters want. So it was all used to create a new news storm, right? But here's the question. In New Brunswick, a proposed policy change would require parental consent for children younger than 16 who wish to change their preferred pronoun or name. Okay. And then which policy would you prefer? And then they list 4 different options. Okay. So here they're doing 2 things at once. They're asking people about pronouns and names. Okay. And right off the bat, when you ask a general poll to general people, like you have to assume they even know what the fuck a pronoun is, which I'm not convinced that the majority of people understand grammar to that extent. But Sandy, is it legal for children to change their own name right now in any part of Canada?
Absolutely. No, of course not.
Right? Kids can't change their fucking name.
It is very hard for actually anyone to try to change their name. So if we want to have a discussion about what the real issues are here, like, geez, kids can't change their name.
Kids are not allowed to change their names. Certainly, they are not allowed to change their names if they're under the age of 16. If you're older than 16, you go through a legal process. And as you say, it is very difficult. But only children and then youth and then adults older than 16 can change their names. So the question doesn't say that it's law or that we're talking about changing your name from like Samantha to Sam or from Dylan to Dill, like doesn't matter. It's just change their name, which between pronoun and name, people are instantly going to hit, I know what a name is. And I know that it's not legal to just change your name. Of course you need parental consent.
Yeah, you have to be tied into the issue to actually understand the question because it's not getting at what it's trying to get at.
Exactly. And yet journalists reported this as if it was obvious, as if it's part of the culture wars, as if every single person responding understands what that context is, even though the context is not in the question. And this fuels another round of, well, actually, we have the right and we are the majority and we're on the side of rationality. And of course, a child needs consent to change their names, even though it's law. I didn't see a single article say, oh, by the way, it is law to change your name. A kid needs their consent of their parents because that's how it works currently. And the question makes it sound like that's not even the law as in and of itself. So we got disinformation from Angus Reid, creating the conditions for disinformation from journalists, creating the conditions that the far right absolutely uses and exploits to push forward the far right transphobic agenda that they have. And it's so enraging. It's like journalists, all you have to do is your job. Like Angus Reid is a private company and they can do fuckery all they want. But journalists, you are now part of this problem. You are very much part of this problem by refusing to report on the facts in this and allowing the far right to drive it while trans people, while gender non-conforming people are like, what about us? What the fuck is going on? Like, holy shit, we're experiencing rising levels of hatred and blah, 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 blah. So it's very enraging. And it makes the whole question about parental consent ridiculous, because in a question like that, of course, parents have to consent to changing a kid's name. Of course, that's the law. That is the law. That's the law today, right now, currently.
Yeah, I mean, that is a pretty ridiculous omission to make and like a link to make. It's really frustrating, but also really frustrating is how politicians are using this. I'm taking a look at this CBC article that talks about Poilievre's comments on this while speaking at a Pakistan Independence Day celebration. Have you seen this?
No.
Where he says that it's not the Canadian way for the Prime Minister to tell a Muslim man that his values are American because he wants to pass on his traditional teachings to his students. And there's this way that the conservative right is really focusing on Muslim communities right now with this particular issue to try to gain a new audience of supporters, to try to say that this is somehow like this the way that students interact in school and the freedoms that students have, the privacy that kids have while they're in school is infringing on whole rights, on rights of different groups of people. And again, like these are things that like practically this cannot be like this practically you can watch students all you want. You can tell teachers to become little cops, to tell on students. Like it sounds very much similar to like the barbaric practices hotline, except for retooled for trans children. But it's like it's not. You can tell a teacher to do that, but kids are going to explore their identities, and they're going to live out the way that they want to live, because children have their own autonomy, and that should be celebrated and protected in a school environment. But even when it's not a school environment, children are able to support each other. I mean, I don't know if you people remember what it's like to be in school, but you can support each other through creating your identities, through the expression of who you are. And so this isn't again actually about what's happening at the schools. It's about being able to garner political favor amongst groups that the far right are targeting to try to get support going into another election.
Yeah, absolutely. They see this. They see the very clear path to using this issue to galvanize support. And it's so disgusting because we're talking about such a small number of children, a small number of youth, people who are more vulnerable because of the transphobia that exists within all sectors of society, not the least of which, of course, is schools. And to play all of this off of their backs, off of children's backs, is just, it makes me want to vomit. Like, it is so disgusting. And I think that the people who oppose this, by and large, especially liberals, don't have the best arguments. Like, they don't necessarily have the best ways to punch through this stuff. Sometimes they take the bait. Marcy Yen, a federal minister, said that children will die as a result of this, which, I mean, you can make a connection between, the poor mental health and outcomes related to children not being able to live their true authentic selves. But that comment then, of course, gets picked up by the far right and the right in general by saying, look, the liberals are using this. They're overblowing this. This is ridiculous. No one's actually going to die. And it just, again, seems like we've completely lost the ability to untangle what this whole thing is about and realize that, oh, actually, yeah, we're not actually talking about very concrete issues, that these are culture war type things that maybe someone who's not plugged into anything, someone who's got no kids who might, answer an Angus Reid survey is just going to read the words on the page and be like, yeah, of course, it's already the law. Like, I think that makes sense. Or I see name and I don't see pronoun and I don't really get it. So it's like, yeah, of course, that makes sense. So we have to be smarter about fighting back against this stuff. And I do despair that we aren't. And part of that as well is because education is in such a dire situation right now, with rising levels of violence and harassment within the classroom, tons of underfunding and the problems that come with that. And then, of course, all of the other issues in society, from food security to housing, manifesting themselves within the classroom, and teachers not having any ability to address the root causes of why a certain student might be failing or falling through the cracks or struggling or whatever.
Well, yeah, and this is the thing, right? Like, don't play the game on that playing field. Like, this obviously is not a game. These are people's lives, but the far right does treat this like this is a game, right? And, if you are concerned about trans youth, trans kids, and dying, because yes, of course, that is something that is a reality for these kids. Like, why would you be fighting about parental rights? Like, wouldn't you want to make sure that there is enough support for a shelter system, make sure that there's enough social supports for these kids to access if they are in in dire straits. Like if you want school to be a safe place where people can, where kids can say like home is not safe for me, making sure that there's enough funding for those types of social and mental health supports in schools should be the discussion, not something about parental rights. Like what the fuck is that? That is like some amorphous thing that doesn't mean anything. If you truly do care about students and what they are going through during a time of potential transition or in their gender expression, then there are other things that you desperately need to be talking about. And I mean, if you care about kids and students at all, like as Nora just said, like our schools are not in great shape. Like there is so much to discuss, and you are letting the policymakers off the hook by refusing to talk about what is actually real, what is really going on in education and how these kids are being affected. It is like the most cynical type of politics. And people, you know, when Poilievre is out there toting this line, and when liberals are responding, they should be asked directly about like, okay, but if this is something that you care about, like how are you actually supporting these kids? And, you know, when the conservatives are talking about this, be like, what does this actually mean? Like poke through the bullshit nothingness of this, because I mean, gosh, it's just the ugliest use of a vulnerable population in order to fuel political gain.